Today is the premiere of Pete Talks, and I wanted to thank you again for joining us. We have a special guest with us today, Bill Keyworth, and I'll introduce Bill in just a second. My background is about 28 years of IT and business experience, mostly on the infrastructure operation, service desk, IT service management side. I met Bill Keyworth a long time ago, let's say that, and Bill and I have remained colleagues and friends all these years. And when coming up with the idea for a talk radio show, something that brought back the art of conversation, I thought of Bill right away and some of the work Bill has done in terms of IT service management and the new trend around agile DevOps. So between the two of us, we came up with a agenda for this radio show that we'd like to share with you today. The DevOps program is something that has been emerging over the years from the agile development piece. And organizations right now are trying to manage this rapid technology and business change. They're also trying to do a better job of minimizing business impact and enabling better business productivity and better business opportunity with a seamless transition between service design, service transition, and service operations. So we're going to be talking about some of that wonderful movement in terms of getting the development organization to work closer with the operations department in terms of how they design services, how they transition services, and how they deliver services. One of the things that Bill and I talked about was the opportunity of DevOps to really build a two-way bridge of communication and collaboration between the team, to focus on designing services with the intent to improve usability, navigation, and business functionality from the get-go. Looking at ways that we could manage these services more cost-effectively and also have continuous improvement built in while ensuring the service desk, who is on the front line with a lot of the issues that arise from some of these services not working correctly, to be able to improve their knowledge sharing, first call resolution, and decrease the reliance on the knowledge of these development resources who are trying to deliver projects on a daily basis. Our key takeaways for you today is to really understand some of the aspects of DevOps that you could utilize in your organizations to be able to deliver services from a quality and cost-effective standpoint, and make sure that your customers are really understanding how they could use it better to get their job done. Also, Bill and I are going to share practical experiences of what organizations are doing today in a high-level summary with action steps to make you more successful with your venture into DevOps. And then really starting off with the questions for Mr. Keyworth. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce my special guest. Bill Keyworth is an adjunct research advisor for IDC's Research Network. He's an expert contributor with BTM Institute with a focus on IT operational excellence. Through research, executive, and consulting roles, Bill has led a focus on IT service management as a critical management operation for dynamic elements in IT infrastructure. He has an established reputation and is one of the more credible and consistent voices in maximizing business value from IT operations. It is my pleasure to welcome a close friend, Bill Keyworth. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks, Pete. Just to expand that introduction a little further, I was trying to remember exactly when we met. I think our initial meeting was when I was working at Gartner Group, and then subsequently we connected at an infamous company called Peregrine. The stay at Gartner Group in the mid-90s to early 2000, I had been asked to join them to initiate their network and systems management group, and which ended up being a huge success for them. I think there's 3 or 4 like network and system management groups right now, or services that they offer. And it was during that time I initially met Pete, who was with a vendor, and then we kind of swapped places where he moved into a consulting role, and I moved into the vendor community. I got kind of tired of analyzing and wanted to do, and walked into the company, and it's interesting looking back on it. The help desk that we had, a piece of it went off to BMC, a piece of it went into HP. We bought up IBM Service Desk at the time, and then the whole thing collapsed with criminal fraud. It was definitely one of the more defining moments of my career to have people work with you end up in court. But I share that with just the, and I have been with different analyst firms, different software vendors working with end users since that period of time. But I share that just to try to imply that I've been my passion has very much been in the IT operational space. I believe it's an area that has not received adequate attention by the analyst community, by the industry. I think it's more so now than it was. But this group, these people, are the ones that make things work or fail. So anyway, I'll turn it back to you, Pete.
Well, Bill, I also appreciate the introduction to Israel Gatt, a real thought leader in terms of Agile and DevOps, and I'm sorry he couldn't join us today, but maybe we can get him on the show later on next year. And that was a wonderful introduction, by the way, because he got my head thinking about some of the pain points that I had as a help desk manager and IT infrastructure director, where we just couldn't get the different siloed groups to work together as one team. And so hearing this kind of movement of DevOps around the Agile development got me excited that there might be an opportunity here to really, kind of mend some fences that had been broken during traditional IT operations, at least a pain that I suffered. So if you could just give the audience, what is DevOps? Just give us a kind of a high-level depth on it.
Well, part of your question that you've posted talks about how DevOps is used for quality, cost-effective usability, support. Those are the kind of things you mentioned in your initial introduction to DevOps. But Israel Gatt, you mentioned his name is kind of a Mr. Agile in the consulting world right now. And he has very much sponsored this perspective of the operational role that it plays in that. I believe that software development in many respects has a business advantage in that the applications that are being created are designed and intended to solve real business problems in terms that business understands. I mean, that's what they step into, and they have this direct relationship with the business community as they try to, create requirements and design the application. Yet the value of software development only happens when the application is in actual production and available to the business users. And that requires application deployment. And I should use the word change into the existing IT environment with all of that infrastructure's nuances, its limitations, its issues. Application delivery is the moment when the new or the enhanced application needs to be at its best. But unfortunately, that going live moment is precisely when the application's perception is the most vulnerable and the most visible to the business community. And too frequently, it becomes the most destructive business moment in the application's life cycle. DevOps is the industry's response to that challenge and essentially originated from the success that Agile development methodology is enjoying and has created. And that basically strives to continually introduce lots of small pieces of application code into the computing environment of the business. So this word DevOps comes from this concept of combining development, which is the dev part of the word, and IT operations, which is the ops part of the word. And I think one critical group that's needed, and it's very much a part of the DevOps discussion, is quality control and testing. They frequently serve as a bridge between these two groups, and maybe they're the first beneficiaries of DevOps. Maybe that's how we should look at it. But getting the application adequately tested and prior to deployment into the actual IT infrastructure is very much part of their goal. So maybe the movement should have been called Dev Test Ops, I don't know, but that kind of diminishes the full ownership of the code versus the maintenance, which is where the conflict is. So DevOps works for me.
It does seem like from a mobile apps development side that the mobility application developers are really taking Agile seriously, because it seems that when mobile apps are available, they're changed frequently, always available, and instantly downloaded. Is that kind of where we need to go with the other apps development?
Well, one of the questions you talked about later was low-hanging fruit, and I think the low-hanging fruit is this web environment, these mobile applications, these applications that are built on open source code, and they're the ones where I think DevOps is kind of leading the charge because of the structure of the application itself and subsequently the uniqueness of those deployments.
Yeah, no, we'll get into that a little later, but you talked about the need for testing and quality control, quality assurance, and the moment of truth when that new system or service gets introduced into the live environment or to the business. I heard a couple of organizations were actually going back to the business and surveying the business customers to see what their thoughts were in terms of the rollout or the system. Is that something that you see commonplace where after a service has been introduced, the IT organization is going out and kind of polling, how did we do, what could we do better type thing?
Well, absolutely. I think one of the important metrics of DevOps is how it's been received, and how do you judge that unless you go out and survey the people that are supposedly benefiting from that experience. So, when we get into a discussion of metrics, I very much want to be emphasizing that this is where you go and you create surveys that are testing not only the implementation, the smooth implementation of and the availability of the application, but the actual, does the application solve the problem? And so you're combining both the development and the operations perspective and presenting a unified picture to the user, which I think is very much one of the better practices that are surfacing here, not two organizations going at the business user from two different perspectives.
And taking that and moving into the next question, I always thought that the service desk opportunity was to be the voice of the customer. And certainly it's never more important than that rollout or that first 3 to 6 months of a new app or new service in operations, where the service desk can capture a lot of the issues, the complaints, the questions, the how-to training piece, and really work back to and with the DevOps groups to improve that from a quality assurance or from a minimizing the impact side. Is this DevOps a real opportunity for service managers to be able to take that voice and bring it back to listening ears and get some action?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. When you talk about listening ears, are you talking about the people that are in the IT organization, or are you talking about the business people? The IT organization, okay. I know the bottom of your question, which kind of intrigued me, is this concept of silver lining that all service desk managers have been patiently waiting for. The silver lining implies what you said. They're getting the attention of the people that could make changes in their environment. But let me say, it seems that at the very time that IT's contribution to enterprise business goals is increasingly being questioned, there's this increase in conflict between IT operations and application development. Some of the colleagues that I work with that go out on site and are working with these two groups feel like in some cases the animosity is increasing instead of going the other way. So your question, your statement implies that this conflict isn't new, but it's unfortunately escalating at the very time when critical investments in software technology that are required for competitive advantage are really increasing a lot. So if IT exists to escalate the advancement of business goals, and if IT's metric is focused on getting new technology and business automation into action faster and more efficiently, then resolving this conflict between IT operations and development teams becomes an absolute imperative. So going back to that definition of DevOps methodology, it involves efficient repetition and automation of development, testing, and operational IT tasks. And one of the interesting statistics is that coming out of several application lifecycle cost studies, PEG IT operations is consuming 70 to 90% of that lifecycle cost. So DevOps itself has given some of this change, has driven some of this change in order to reduce that lifecycle cost. I think that's one silver lining. What you were talking about.
I remember when we were talking about IT service management and cost of ownership, not just of PCs or mobile devices, but actual services, that the cost of developing the service was really minuscule to the cost of owning it, maintaining it, and operating it over the many years of its service. I mean, that still has to be accurate, correct?
Oh, it is accurate. That's what I was trying to say, 70 to 90% of the lifecycle cost for the application. I mean, DevOps is essentially very much involved with getting the application up and running, but not only up and running, but easily to be maintained. It's successful in its implementation. I think that the agile roots of DevOps emphasizes this highly valued benefit of what's called as infrastructure as a code in order to achieve this automated, repeatable infrastructure. And then earlier I talked about open source. There's tools like Chef and Puppet that enable scripted, testable, repeatable server configuration every time on physical hardware, or virtualized or cloud services. So this is where you check your infrastructure configuration into source control that brings reproducibility, traceability, repeatability, all these abilities that brings developers and operations closer together. And these are magnificent IT attributes, and they're much more achievable within a DevOps culture. That's, again, another silver lining. But I think the paramount question in reducing the application lifecycle is how prepared is IT operations to institute infrastructure as a code for things like running the network, managing the performance of data storage, optimizing availability for tens and hundreds of virtualized servers, of shortening the mean time to repair for trouble tickets, or training or tracking unexpected changes that come from unexpected IT assets or unexpected IT code. So it requires essential personnel, both IT and business, to effectively connect at the earliest possible design stage and then stay focused on the application's contribution to business right through delivery, maintenance, and optimization of that code. I guess it would be appropriate to call DevOps a silver lining to those who carry responsibility to the end users for supporting the infrastructure and the applications, and that is the service desk. And to have participation from the development group for the service desk regarding the way the business community actually uses that technology that's been brought or bought into the company. I think that's huge.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill. Why don't we move on to next question is how can DevOps best impact the positioning of the customer business service desk for success during any technology rollout?
Well, here when I have this discussion, I want to emphasize the concept of a three-legged stool. You have one leg for development and one leg for operations, and that's what I think if there's a risk involved, it's the fact that we become focused on only those two legs. And there's a third leg for the business, which is the driving factor behind DevOps in the first place. The question asked about the customer, the business, and the service desk. Any good service desk can understand and appropriately respond to the nuances of IT's customer, which is usually the business end users, while the business customer is the actual recipient of the customer's product or service, and that becomes everyone's customer. Here we're talking about the larger IT operations group, which involves all the support levels, not just the front, and all maintenance functions. With the service desk, I think you called it being the front of that IT operations organization of the larger business community. So I'm stating the obvious, but basically DevOps should be increasing the volume, the rapidity, the value of delivering new business applications as perceived by the business decision maker and not the IT organization. So it's like, what does the business care about? They care about, increasing revenue and profit margins and getting better relationships with customers and creating competitive advantage and differentiating their products and services and distribution supply. I mean, it's those things. And the concept of DevOps addresses this business imperative and originated in, I think, the correct belief that agile development techniques can and should be extended to the practice of IT operations in order to, better accommodate this alignment with business value through technology. So early detection of defects, minimization of implementation risk, rapid responses to changes in business priorities have got to be the benefit and the focus of DevOps. That's the reward of DevOps for both business and IT. And I think there's a healthy buzz right now about DevOps. It's created an emphasis within the IT industry as a critical need for collaboration and automation of code and infrastructure deployment. But unfortunately, and this is my concern, in the rush to get that wall between development and operations broken down, it'd be criminal to have the third perspective, the business value, get the short shift And that's the risk of an inappropriate implementation of DevOps. And so anyway, I'm just essentially saying you've got to focus on that third leg.
Right, and that third leg per se is the voice of the customer, voice of the business, to make sure that as an intent of DevOps that gets executed upon, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And so going into the next question, I was actually meeting with a group of senior executives, and they were talking about the contact demand that they were getting at their service desk. And what was interesting, their tone of voice was that they were kind of blaming the service desk for this volume. And I was trying to, kind of convey, the service desk typically doesn't cause the volume. They're there to manage the volume, and that it would be nice categorically for this service desk to be able to go back to senior executives and explain who's calling and why they're calling. Do you think that's a good way for service desk managers to approach DevOps and senior management, and knowing which customers are calling about which services and products and what the reason is that they're calling?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I don't think anybody knows about the issues that the customers have from the IT perspective better than the service desk who takes these calls and hears firsthand their frustrations with IT. But in the case of DevOps, I'm kind of hopeful or optimistic for two reasons. First, the maturity and proven success of the Agile movement for what's called iterative and incremental software development. And DevOps originated in that camp, so that's one positive. And the second one is the increasing quality of the services provided by IT operations as evidenced at the service desk through a maturing focus on IT's relationship with customers. And they take into account that critical contribution of the service desk. I think these are noteworthy positive trends in the industry, but by themselves, I don't think Agile development or IT service management is going to resolve the frustration of the business end users. They don't really care about how IT does their job. They do care about technology's business market. So what recommendations, I think what your question is, what recommendations would I make for the service desk and how to best approach it? To strengthen what you just said, I document meticulously the issues, the problems, the feedback that surface within each application deployment. And you don't do this by finger pointing in a way that creates defensive reactions by the developers, but it's how you do it. You do it in a collaborative way, saying we, IT, we've had this experience, and emphasize the question regarding what can we do to improve, even to the point of putting the service desk on what's called the sacrificial altar to be attacked, because the service desk represents the customer's viewpoint, and I think there's strength in that. Any DevOps participants regarding what's the problem and what's the best way to handle it. Another one is this emphasizing the service concept in IT service management, again, the service desk. This is new thinking to most developers. They typically don't think in the concept of providing services. They think of resolving business issues with code. And they need that service perspective, which is what the service desk can and should excel in. And third, I guess I'd ensure, guarantee, or insist, if I was a manager of a service desk, of my people understanding the business problem that the application is supposed to be solving, and understanding the way that the application solves that business problem. I think it's important the service desk talk intelligently to the business user who thinks his world's collapsed because the old application they were using has gone away, or they don't understand the way the newer code's going to rescue them. So.
Yeah, agreed. I talked to one executive who was starting to think about having shared goals and objectives or performance objectives across their directors and across their functions, and one of them was just the aspect of quality services, so that if all the functions within IT shared common goals and objectives, I would think that they'd be in a position to work better together and, not see the service desk as the problem people, but see it more as the voice of the customer, as you said.
Yeah, and that's where their strength is. That's where they can get people to listen to them, is if they document those things and share them in a collaborative mode.
And I know you have a couple of thoughts for us in terms of low-hanging fruit. What are some of the low-hanging fruit that both teams can start working together on, Bill?
Well, I guess in answering that question, I get into this interesting, many of the online and verbal discussions, they kind of identify the primary challenge is getting, quote, IT operations to be more creative and flexible in their approach to changes that are coming from the application development discipline. When I get into those discussions or read them or participate in them, whatever, if Agile describes the unique contribution the development making, and again, Agile is the instigator for the whole DevOps thing, then what is the expected and unique contribution of the IT operations function? And, I can quote examples, and I'm not going to spend the time to do that, but it's this, why isn't operations responding to these great things that we're doing in Agile at the same time that Agile is sending all these changes more frequently into the infrastructure? So I guess low-hanging fruit, I define the low-hanging fruit as those web-based applications that are leveraging open source code. It's internal IT's attempt to effectively compete. They're doing this because that's what they're competing with, this myriad of SaaS and cloud applications, software as a service, that are surfacing as alternatives to internally developed IT apps. And I think we need to ensure those are successful and that they're deployed appropriately, correctly, during the first time or at least the third or fourth attempt. So to me, that's a very piece of low-hanging fruit, is to concentrate on the piece that the developers are focused on right now, new development code, and let's postpone the discussion of the legacy environment or some of the hardware stuff later.
Well, in terms of the legacy environment, I gotta believe that no CIO wants to be labeled by their legacy apps or infrastructure, and certainly no CIO or IT organization wants to be seen as responsible for holding the business back by not being competitive because they can't develop, applications and roll them out in a timely manner. I would think that would be on all CIOs' mind right now.
Well, we're talking about significant change that's happening in the world. You mentioned some of the mobile applications, social media, the cloud opportunities. There's huge change. What else is new in IT operations? So, but what I think is those changes are necessary for IT to step forward and to move forward, to survive, to become the IT service provider of choice for its business customers. And I believe this kind of cultural change can be initiated from kind of a bottom-up approach, where the IT staff goes and starts working together with these people on, whoever they're not part of. But the true long-lasting success does require not only the support of the CIO, but, as you implied, the active encouragement, the sponsorship, the monitoring of that CIO, so the DevOps progress can be positioned and promoted to the people he's connected with, which are the business executives, the business leaders. And I don't think anything captures the attention of upper management like success. To be able to walk into that IT executive and describe a success in a prototype DevOps project is incredible in gaining that person's attention. Or to have the business users send emails to that IT executive complimenting the IT organization in something that previously, previously only caused grief and embarrassment, which you mentioned. No CIO wants that. Or, even better, to have development and operations walk hand in hand or be actively supporting each other's goals and issue resolution. Wouldn't that do wonders in demonstrating that this is a new and highly desirable world? Demanding that the CIO get involved in working out, these age-old conflicts between these two groups, it's I don't want to say death. It's not the way to go. So right. We kind of do need a bottom-up approach, but the messaging catered to the people that are connecting with the business community so that they can leverage it, use it.
Yeah. And so in kind of, I agree. I think there's no better people to, be able to tell success than business champions out there that see a noticeable difference in the way things are being done, and they're able to kind of voice that, success rate back to IT. That's the ultimate in compliment. But what else do you think is out there for people to start measuring to show the impact of their efforts in this DevOps?
When you get into this concept of measurements and metrics, they're hard. And I think too often the metrics defined within our IT service management community are metrics that are important to IT personnel, but they don't have any importance to business personnel. So I would encourage metrics that measure who cares about the successful application deployment, who's involved in getting that application up and functioning. You know, it's kind of like we need more pigs that put their all into the production of the bacon and less chickens who drop an egg and move on to another roost. So I think metrics that are demonstrating the involvement of people in getting this up, I think is a good one. And you know, another obvious metric is something we already talked about, measuring the initial success of the customer's usage and interface with that new app. You know, does it do the job? How many questions came in that depict inadequate or superior training? You mentioned customer satisfaction surveys from first-time or prototype users of, you know, the new application, and then comparing those to past deployments. I think service desk metrics that depict number of calls, issues, outages, resolutions, you know, but they're focused on getting the next application better. Again, it's reiterative, it's repetitive. That's part of the agile discussion, and knowing that the next one may be coming later that day, and we're going to make the next one better.
Well, and you know, I even being more proactive, you know, knowing what the cycle is for releases, or, you know, just having an idea of when to plan for if they needed to do staff augmentation, or they needed to do better communication, or, you know, better training. I'm working with one group right now who every time they release a new app that has different usability, functionality, or navigation, they're using a series of YouTube videos, 3 to 5 minute videos that they're hopefully addressing the how do I do this questions and publishing them on the self-service website. And the customers are really reacting positively to the introduction of these YouTube videos. So there's always something we can do, you know, either reactively or proactively to kind of better position ourselves to handle this.
Well, I think this is where the service desk, they know that. They know the benefit of a little 3-minute clip and that it's going to be watched and people aren't going to open manuals. You know, and again, this perspective of the service desk can be extremely valuable in moving DevOps forward.
Agreed. Agreed. I think on my next question, we actually probably addressed this already, but it's more of, you know, what's really forced the hand to have these groups being more cooperative and collaborative. And I think you mentioned, you know, just the technology change coming about, the cloud, social media, the mobile, all of that, and then the business competitiveness, the business demand, and the integration of IT with the business. Are all these kind of things happening or converging to really force the hand to get these groups to work better together?
Well, absolutely. I guess one of the ways I'd like to respond to that is kind of describe what's happening when it's working. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's a certain group of indicators or evidence that DevOps initiatives might actually be taking root and winning. And I think we need to find out what those are and then begin to look for them. If you're looking for something, you're actually in some cases going to create the end result. So, you know, first, everyone within IT is focused on delivering the application as a compelling service offering. I emphasize the word service offering. Again, that's not the way developers think. That is the way ITSM thinks. And then it's measured by the business customer. Second, the customer perspective is embedded in the IT cultural mindset that the application isn't finished or done until it's working and deployed in a production environment. That's, again, a new behavior for development in many cases, and something that the DevOps is trying to address. I think there should be the evidence of success is there's a whole team approach to agile methodology that includes both the development and operations. Why, again, drive better business value. And another one is that everyone within IT cares about deployment. This surfaces when you put the requirements together and in the design stages of the cycle and continuing through build and test and maintenance. Another one is the application development lifecycle includes, you know, the after deployment stages of operations and optimization. You know, these are the places where IT operations plays the critical lead, not development. but you still have development engaged, and so frequently in the past they haven't been at those stages. And I think another one is that all IT functionally, culturally comprehend and are really proactive about being engaged with other IT functions beyond their domain. You have developers that are interested in operations, operations that are interested in testing, testing that's interested in both. And I think application testing becomes one of the key critical success factors. Documented change management process. These agile concepts of continuous integration, moving to continuous delivery. Those are signs that when those start to happen, you're beginning to experience success. And I think if we're looking for those, we begin to find them, and then we can begin to promote and package and position them.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. But while we transition over to the next question, I got a question from the audience here. Do you feel there's any great risk with DevOps right now going on? I know you mentioned that we might be moving a little too quickly into areas that might lose the point of DevOps, but do you see other risks associated with it?
Well, yeah, I think one of the greatest risk is that if we don't have laser focus on the, it's the typical stuff we say in ITIL or ITSM, the processes, the people, and the communication that are required to align IT and the business customer with whatever the DevOps is trying to accomplish. What begins as an essential step forward to IT to enhance business value could possibly erode IT's customer relationships. And right now the industry has this really need for success within the IT business relationship. And unquestionably, and it's already happening, there's going to be some exceptional IT leaders who document successful IT or DevOps achievements, that really do optimize the business use of technology. That opportunity is genuine. However, there's also a danger that IT organizations are going to once again execute successful IT projects, successful DevOps projects that get mired in IT metrics and IT processes and IT relationships and IT documentation that focus on IT's definition of technology objectives, and they miss the more critical focus on DevOps, which is a faster achievement of business value. I think that's a risk. We kind of do that to ourselves.
I agree. Is there a recommended way or some thoughts that you might have where we could get the CIO's attention to DevOps or the benefits or concept of DevOps if the organization hasn't started to pursue it?
Yeah, again, I mentioned earlier about the CIO, this ability to walk in with a successful prototype, to walk in and have the two groups actually working together,
right.
To have the business people that are receiving the end on the customers. The service desk, when they're talking to somebody and they go, oh, this has really worked great, they should say, hey, drop a note to my CEO about that and say, that you've had a good experience with this application. Soliciting your users to be, to tell the people who are the decision makers that this is actually working. I think, again, the statement I said earlier, nothing captures the attention of upper management like success, and to move that success in a way that they hear it and they can subsequently share it with the people that they feel responsible to.
Yeah, we used to we had business champions that they were critical, they were tough, but they were fair. And when they liked something and something was done well, they were one of the first ones to go back to the CIO and let them know. And I think that's probably the perfect way for the CIO to understand the business impact of doing something right.
Well said. Well said. Everybody likes to work for those kind of people.
No doubt about it.
We don't all get that chance, but when we do, it really is nice.
Yep. So, Bill, we're running around our time. We have about 4 minutes left. So I wanted to get to the point where we're talking about some of the practices that you're seeing in some of your customers and some of your clients and some of the industry. So what are some of the practices that are going on right now that you would recommend to our audience in terms of DevOps?
Well, let me just mention a couple that I think are consistently. I do believe DevOps initial success when you first get started with it is limited to open source and web development environments. I've already said that. But and then recognize that that collaborative culture built on those things, that development is, current, it's new, it's what people are working with. They're going to gradually replace the currently contentious and ineffective relationship that exists between development operations. And I think that's only going to happen if this concept of a service management mentality permeates the DevOps culture. I don't see enough of that yet. But when it is there, I think that's important. I think there needs to be less focus in IT organizations on defining DevOps and how it's different than status quo, and more focus on identifying those principles of DevOps that can have measurable and lasting impact, on accelerating this business value to the customer. I also think that IT should deploy and support each new business application as a mandatory component of a service. And again, this is where I think IT Ops walks in with some expertise that development doesn't have. It's how do you package that new application within the context of a service, and how do you package that in a service catalog and in your service portfolio. I think that the DevOps agenda has got to be mutually driven by both agile development as well as the processes of ITSM. That's very much a consistent part of what I've seen work. I think that without a dynamic and responsive change management process, where you have these changes coming at you very quickly, that you're going to flounder. You'll never be able to be responsive to what development wants or what the business wants. And then again, I mentioned quality control and testing. I think we need to focus on empowerment of those individuals or those groups that do that and help them be a bridge between the two groups. Those are some of the things I've seen that are pretty consistent.
That's great, Bill. And before we wrap up, I just comment about that last question there is, sometimes I get the feeling that we take services and we design them from the inside out. Namely, we take what people we have, what process we have, and what tools we have, and we kind of put them all together into what we would call a service, and then we introduce the service to the business. And what's absent from that service design is the business or customer perspective. And I think one of the things that DevOps is challenging us to do is trying to get thoughtful from a customer and business perspective in designing the service from the outside in, and making sure that the customer and the business is a key component of how that service is utilized for business benefits. Would you agree?
Oh, I would absolutely agree, and I think it would be fascinating to get like Ian Clayton, who really goes into a lot of examples about this, the goodness of outside in versus inside out in service management. Absolutely, and DevOps is a great example of how that can actually happen.
Yeah, sometimes I think we get a little complacent or whatever's convenient in terms of delivering a service, and that's typically what's us, rather than the challenge of reaching out and delivering it from the outside in is something I think we could all benefit from. So with that, I would like to give a big thank you to Mr. Keyworth, to Thought Rock Productions, and to you, our audience, for listening and your attention into our first or premiere of Pete Talks. Please put on your calendar to join us Tuesday, November 27th for our next conversation of Pete Talks, where we'll focus on knowledge management and how to build a successful KM program and learning culture. If you enjoyed the program and the content and Mr. Keyworth, please let us know and help us grow our community and audience. Pass the word on to your colleagues. And with that, I'd like to say goodbye, have a great week, and I wish you all the success in the world.